21st at 9 a.m. and experience over 3 hours of exclusive interviews, musical performances, and more. This celebration of Guam's 77th will air on PBS Guam, KGTF, Channel 12, and streaming on the PBS Guam Facebook and YouTube pages. This special broadcast is made possible by PBS Guam, our generous supporters, and Choice Broadcasting.
KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Another Texas showdown. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Democrat state lawmakers bolting the state to prevent a voter reform measure from moving forward, 51 of them flying to Washington on private jets.
Democrats are apparently prepared to stay in D.C. for weeks. Here's one state lawmaker upon arrival.
It breaks our heart that we have to do it. But we do it because we are in a fight to save our democracy.
Moments after they left the state, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton called the lawmakers childish and shameless, and Governor Greg Abbott said
the Democrats must put aside partisan political games and get back to the job they were elected to do.
State Republicans say they'll use every available resource to secure a quorum, though for now it's unclear exactly what that means.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. Democrats in Texas also staged a quorum-busting walkout in late May. There's new concern about a possible side effect to one of the coronavirus vaccines. The Centers for Disease Control says about 100 people who've received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine have reported symptoms similar to Guillain-Barré syndrome, including muscle weakness and paralysis. The risk, the CDC says, is extremely rare, as nearly 13 million people have received the single-dose J&J vaccine. A White House meeting on violent crime Monday.
Mayors and law enforcement leaders from cities fighting rising gun crimes met with President Biden and the Attorney General.
We've been at this a long time. A long time. Seems like most of my career I've been dealing with this issue.
The president says while there is no one-size-fits-all approach,
we know there are some things that work. And the first of those that works is stemming the flow of firearms used to commit violent crimes.
The president is also encouraging states and cities to use COVID relief funding to hire new police officers, pay overtime, and advance community policing.
Fox's Jared Halpern. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
In response to large anti-government protests in Cuba, there's a warning from the U.S. Coast Guard.
Cuban police have stepped up security after protests against food shortages and high prices. Cuba's president said the demonstrations were stirred up on social media by Cuban Americans in the U.S. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Marco Rubio posting on Twitter,
"These people are frustrated. They want to live in a normal country. They don't want to have their kids getting on rafts and having to leave the country."
Now, the U.S. Coast Guard has issued a warning to anyone from Cuba who may be considering taking that journey. The transit is dangerous and unforgiving, as nearly 20 lives were tragically lost in recent weeks as a result of these dangerous voyages. They also said they're monitoring any activity that may indicate increases in unsafe and illegal maritime migration. Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
Nearly 60 wildfires are burning through 10 western states. Firefighters hoping that a forecast moderation in excessive heat will help their containment efforts. Major stock indices notched more record highs on Wall Street Monday as investors look ahead to a wave of earning reports from big U.S. companies coming out this week, starting with several major banks on Tuesday. A new study finds the pandemic hasn't improved Americans' generosity when the restaurant tab comes.
You would think most people would be tipping more after watching their favorite restaurants struggle to stay afloat during the pandemic, but apparently that's not the case. A new study out by creditcard.com finds Americans' tipping habits are basically the same as before coronavirus took hold of the country. The worst tippers are younger folks, millennials, ages 25 to 40, and Gen Zers, ages 18 through 24. One reason, compared to their elders, younger generations generally have less money. According to this study, younger people are less likely to tip less, not only at sit-down establishments, but also for food delivery people, taxi cabs, hairstylists, and hotel housekeeping. John Saucier, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Bank Pacific. Happy 67th anniversary. Viva Bank Pacific!
Bank Pacific, serving our Pacific communities for 67 years. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Pastrami is back at Subway. Pepper-crusted beef layered with crispy pickles, mustard, and melted provolone cheese. Nothing comes close to the pleasure of sinking your teeth into that chewy, juicy, well-seasoned pastrami. It's happiness in a sub. Head down to the nearest Subway restaurant and satisfy your craving for the deli perfection that is pastrami. Subway. Eat fresh. Pastrami sub is available to all Subway locations on Guam and Saipan, including NCS, for a limited time only.
Hafaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and Situas Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Second Amendment, United States Constitution, Tall Tales, The Point, Tumum Guam. Every day we pursue constitutionally oriented conservative talk, telephone, and Facebook. So if you're interested in those things, you are in the right place. If you're not, you're still in the right place because you need some education. You need to get up and get caught up with what's really going on here. Let's start out with our usual starting place here, Zemi Ikotny. Zemi Ikotny is my version of Meet the Press, except it's a whole lot better than Chuck Todd's Meet the Press. I don't pretend that I'm some sort of even-handed referee-type person that will give you both sides of any particular story. I'll tell you what's going on, and I'll tell you what I think about it, and invite you to come in, call in, comment, disagree, agree, applaud, whatever you want to do. So here's the here's the Daily News editorial for today. Not much of an editorial. We need to convince more on Guam to get vaccinated. Our community must find ways to convince more people to get vaccinated. Guam is close to the governor's goal of fully vaccinating 80% of adults by July 21. But the vaccination rate for Chamorros and the island's FSM community is low. Last Thursday, Guam recorded its 141st Wuhan virus-related fatality. The 72-year-old woman pronounced dead upon arrival at GMH wasn't vaccinated. All of Guam's recent Wuhan virus-related deaths weren't vaccinated. As we work toward rebuilding Guam, we're reminded that Wuhan virus remains a threat to our community, most especially those who have yet to get vaccinated, said Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. The big question is, what more can be done to convince our community to get vaccinated? The danger of the virus is clear. The number of people who Wuhan virus has sickened or killed is evident. It shut down our tourism industry and shattered the economy. Are we talking about the Wuhan virus, or are we back to Governor Leon Guerrero again?
Maybe it's the Luhan virus.
Okay. Yeah. Unvaccinated residents are a risk to the entire community and could become hosts for Wuhan virus variants. Guam National Guard spokesman Mark Scott said the Guard is trying to compensate for slowed interest in the field house by sending out armed patrols to round up those who aren't vaccinated and stick the needle in their arm. Yeah.
What is this, Argentina?
Yeah, that's why nobody's crying. Yeah. Guam National Guard spokesman Mark Scott said the Guard is trying to compensate for slowed interest in the UOG Fieldhouse Clinic by conducting other vaccine outreach programs. Guard, quote, strike teams assist the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Services in administering vaccines in the community. Dr. Hua Gwen, chairman of the Governor's Physicians Advisory Group, said more targeted outreach clinics are needed to increase vaccinations among the FSM community. But everyone is scratching their head right now on how to approach the Chamorro population. How about something like this? Maniluhods and maninahu. Gual si Hua Gwen. Medico Zoo. Sa gagizu pago na haani para be quantusid and epoch hamzu todus debidi un get the shot.
How about not calling your outreach program a strike team?
Yeah, that would be a good start, yeah. Well, Gwen has worked pretty hard here on this whole vaccine thing, so I don't think you and I should needle him too much, Jose. Yeah. We have to get out there, Gwen said, not just to central locations in the villages, but into neighborhoods and subdivisions within the villages where migrants live. But if a new car, 10,000 and other prizes given away every week isn't incentive enough to motivate people to get vaccinated, what will it take? That never motivates me, because in my entire life, you know what I won? Nothing. I never won anything. I'm just not a lucky type person, and I don't even participate in these. You know, just sign your name and you might win. No, not for me.
Not everybody's susceptible to bribes.
Exactly. Gov Guam should reach out to the Archdiocese of Agana and local churches, all in the name of separation of church and state. Yeah, Gov Guam should reach out to the Archdiocese of Agana when they have a vaccine, when Gov Guam has a vaccine that's not abortion tainted, right?
You are correct.
Especially those frequented by regional migrants. Perhaps income tax credits can be offered as incentives for vaccinations. I don't know how that would work. One thing is clear, we need more people to get vaccinated. Yeah. Okay, well, no objection. If that's the way you want to go, fine. Now, the Post has a good editorial today, a really good editorial. The debate about the medical malpractice claims process should conclude with a vote. Both sides in the debate to change or leave the law unchanged on the issue of how medical malpractice claims should be filed have invested time and emotion in letting the public know of their stance. There has been more public input and debate on the proposed changes in Bill 112 than in other equally pressing issues that have far-reaching impacts on all who call Guam home. The medical community has been in large part vocally opposed to changing the mandatory arbitration required before patients or their designated representatives can sue a medical doctor or other healthcare professionals. The primary author of the change, Speaker Therese Terlahi, proposes some alternatives to make the process more affordable to the aggravated parties, arguing that the current requirement for a mandatory arbitration before the issue reaches court for trial can cost the claimant at least $10,000 in filing fee alone, and upwards of $40,000 or more throughout the mandatory arbitration process. In Bill 112, an arbitration path will be an option, but a more affordable alternative is being offered via a confidential screening process by a magistrate who will decide whether a claim of medical malpractice has merit to proceed in full open court process or is frivolous and cannot proceed. Well, that's not exactly the way it is. You know, this word frivolous is kicked around with carefree abandon as though people really know what it means. And I want to stop here and talk about that a bit. I suspect that in the whole country there are very few frivolous medical malpractice claims filed. Frivolous does not mean, a frivolous filing doesn't mean, well, yeah, it was a weak case, or it was a close case, or there were problems with the case. Frivolous means it's laughable. You know, a frivolous person is one who doesn't take things seriously. He, instead of engaging in serious pursuits, engages in frivolity. And that, you know, frivolous is a really, really low standard. In order for a complaint to be found frivolous, a lawyer really has to screw it up. I think I used the example the other day of a frivolous lawsuit. Yesterday, Robert Klitzkie walked on the sidewalk beside Marine Corps Drive through Hagatnya, exposing his bare face to all and sundry. Plaintiff, while keeping a proper lookout and minding their own business, chanced upon Klitzkie, who, by exposing his bare face, inflicted extreme emotional distress on plaintiff. That would be an example of a frivolous lawsuit. You know, I mean, there's nothing there. Now, some would say, well, yeah, that's pretty extreme, Bob. You know, some malpractice lawyers will bring those malpractice suits, medical malpractice suits, because they figure, you know, well, what the hell, we'll file a complaint. Let's see what happens. We'll sue them for $1 million. Maybe they'll settle for half. Or, you know, we'll sue for $300,000 and maybe the insurance company will give us 20 grand just to go away, something like that. I suspect that doesn't happen very often. I know that if it happened here, a lawyer would run the risk of being disciplined by the bar, but potentially disbarred by the bar. So I think the chances of frivolous lawsuits, you know, the sorting out process of the magistrate doing this kind of pre-hearing, I don't think that's where the action is, because I suspect there wouldn't be very many frivolous lawsuits. I talked about this a little bit the other day, doctors just don't want to be sued for malpractice at all if there's any way they can avoid it. And I suspect that it's not the frivolous cases that are the ones that are hard for them to deal with. It's the close cases, the ones that are right on the line. Did he deviate from the standard of care? Well, if he did, it was just by a scintilla. Well, that's all it takes. You know, so we brought in the experts, and we had two highly qualified experts, and it was a battle of the experts, and the jury apparently put one ahead of the other. Maybe it's because they liked her looks better than his. Sexist, right? But I mentioned this so many times on the show. When you go into court, you know, you're looking for justice. Lawyers know what they're doing. Judges know what they're doing. We've been at this in the Anglo-American world for 1,000 years, and we put together a pretty good system. Nonetheless, when you go into court, there's always an element of crapshoot. You know, that the results sometimes are no more predictable than rolling a couple of dice out on a green felt. And if I were a doctor, that would scare me too, because being a doctor is a science and it's an art. And I suspect popular sentiment is this, that when your loved one is being treated by a doctor and that person doesn't survive, what's the first thing that popped into your head? What did the doctor do wrong? How did the doctor screw up? Something must have gone wrong. Let's sue the doctor. So I completely understand the doctors not wanting to be sued for malpractice. Now, on the other hand, you know, I can completely understand people who think that things turned to ashes because the doctor didn't comply with the standard of care or took a shortcut or something like that. I watched a little bit of the hearing last night. I watched Maria Espinosa tell about taking her son to the dentist, having to go under general anesthesia, being taken from the operating room to the emergency room at GMH, and being in a coma and bedridden for the next 8 years with a breathing tube and a feeding tube and everything like that. Now, that shouldn't happen when a person goes to the dentist. And if it does happen, then you can certainly understand how the parent of that poor gentleman must have felt when that all happened, especially since Maria had to take care of that bedridden man for the next 8 years until he finally passed away. So, you know, when we compare the sides here, a little empathy goes a long way for both sides. There's room for empathy on both sides. And, of course, there's also room for demonization on both sides. The greedy doctors, all they want to do is make money. The greedy lawyers, all they want to do is sue doctors and make money, etc. So let's see, I've got somebody here in the green room. I got R. Carl. R. Carl, I'm going to finish this editorial, and then I'll let the most dangerous man in the room into the room, but not into the operating room. There's no telling what kind of havoc he could wreak in there, right? Doctors opposed to removing the mandatory pretrial arbitration argue that many doctors have gone out of their way to extend the scope of their practice to accommodate patients who can't get the kinds of specialized care they need on the island. With the mandatory arbitration removed to protect them from being directly sued, some of the doctors have said they will limit their services to within the scope of their specialty or practice. Some doctors have said because of the legal exposure, they'd leave Guam. I guess one doctor, you know, It isn't Christmas time, I know, but one doctor said if that becomes law, I'm going to leave here in a one-horse shay. Yeah. Some clinics have sent letters to patients saying they may have to leave the island for health care more often, also a more costly process to get health care specializations not available here. Well, I just have a couple of comments here. Let's say that a person is being treated by a doctor, and the doctor said, you know, I'm a surgeon, but you need the kind of surgery that I understand, I've studied, but I have not done enough of it to feel that I'm really competent as a surgeon in that area. So you got a choice. You can go to San Lago and get your surgery there from a real ace in this field. Patient said, Doc, if they had that kind of surgery on Cocos Island, I couldn't afford it. Can't you please do it? And the doctor said, well, I'll tell you what, there are risks involved. I'll explain the risk to you, and if I have your informed consent, then I'll take a crack at it. That might work. The other comment that I have is this. What the doctors who say what I just said about doing these things that outside of their lane, as we say, are saying we've been doing something that doesn't meet the standard care for a long time, but we've gotten away with it because of the MMAA. So we want to keep getting away with it, so don't take the MMAA away. Again, I can understand that, but is that a really good way to operate what amounts to a life and death system? So back to the editorial. Some clinics have sent letters to patients say they may have to leave the island for health care more often, also a more costly process to get certain health care specializations not available here. In the midst of the debate, Governor Leon Guerrero suggested that the Speaker withdraw Bill 112. I think it's the best way to do that, given the whole controversy, the governor said. I think we need to get everybody in a room and just hash the discussions out. Now, I'll give the governor credit once in a while for having a good idea. This doesn't happen to be one of them. We have, and I want to just back up for a second. I heard this, and I've tried to research it and get some authentication, but I have heard that in ancient Greece, where, Athens is where democracy came from, the title of politician was an honorable title. Because when you have a democracy, you have everybody tugging and pulling, wanting to take that democracy in his own or her own direction. You have factions and interest groups and things like that, so you're going to have controversy. So the job of the politician was to understand the competing interests, groups, thrusts, etc., and be able to rationalize this across the whole democracy in a manner so that when the decision was made, it wasn't perhaps what anybody wanted, but it was something that everybody could live with. And that's the purpose of our legislature. If you stop to think about it, it's supposed to be a professional debating society where competing interests have representation on the floor of the legislature. The members of the legislature make their points, they debate, they bring in various facts and laws, etc., to justify their point. And when it's all over, they vote, and the governor vetoes or approves. It's certainly not a perfect system, but it's the best one we've been able to come up with yet. To get everybody in a room, I'll tell you what, we could get everybody in a room and we could get that guy Edward Lear to be in charge of the whole thing. Give him a gavel and let him keep order, right?
Remember Ross Perot? Can I talk? Can I talk?
Yeah. So that's what the legislature's for, and that's what we're doing right now. We have a hotly contested issue. There are obviously strong interests and feelings on both sides, and we're working through it. And the way we work through it is we let people come before the legislature and tell the members of the legislature what they think ought to be done and relate their stories and go through the whole thing. That is fine, and I'm going to pat Therese Trelawney on the back again, probably the 467th time, for the way she's handled this. She has been the essence of a responsible senator in this whole process. She reacted to public interest, she surfaced the issue, she went out of her way to educate the public as to her solution. She's had now 3 different public occasions where people could come in and speak. She said, I'm going to have another public hearing. And every time I've heard her speak, or almost every time she's been quoted in the paper, she said, I'm willing to listen. I'll take suggestions. I want to try to improve my bill. So the old pride of authorship doesn't seem to be governing her approach to this. What I think should happen is she should have another public hearing. She should have another public hearing until we get to the point where people figure, yeah, everybody who had something to say had a chance to say it. And, of course, some will have a chance to say it several times. I don't want to mention Tom Shea's name, but two public hearings, 2 Tom Shea performances, right? So then I would hope that based on what the members heard, a substitute bill would be put together incorporating some of the suggestions that have come up, some of the things that members may have thought of. You know, the way a senator's work, at least the way my head worked, was I would go into a bill public hearing process, and I'd think I pretty well knew which way it ought to go if I wanted to make amendments. But sometimes after having the bill introduced, hearing other people, maybe I don't necessarily adopt what their suggestion, but it spurs a different thought process, and I look at things in a different way. That's the beauty of this iterative process that we call public hearings. So after the public hearings, perhaps a substitute bill could emerge, which, of course, ought to go before a couple more public hearings till we get it down to the point where we have some sense that nobody got exactly what he wanted, but everyone got something he could live with. That could be a goal. Back to the editorial, but getting everybody, and of course, if Lou gets everybody in a room, you know what the first thing she's going to do? Lock the door. Yeah. All you news turkeys, go away. When it's all over, I'll come out and I'll tell you what you need to know.
And they gobbled it up.
And they gobbled, and away they went, yeah. The governor says, I think it's the best way to do that, given the whole controversy. Well, the fact that there's a controversy is not something that you should say, oh, this is bad, there's a controversy. That means that you are resolving important interests in the community. This is something, if the legislature doesn't ever have any controversy before it, it means that they're shying away from important issues. All they're doing is issuing resolutions to someone for retiring or something like that. Let's take a short break, come back to Zemi Kotny.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Attention men and women in uniform, veterans and reservists. Get ready for the 77th Liberation Hike and Bike. Get up and move with the Silkies Hike. And easy bike along Marine Corps Drive with stops at historic sites and monuments with a super hot cool down at Paseo. Hike rally at 7 a.m. on Liberation Day in Assen. Bike rally 7 a.m. at Paseo. Let's beat suicide with humor and camaraderie. Sign up at Eventbrite. Look for Silkies Hike Guam 1 and check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Made possible by Gotcha 671, Irreverent Warriors, Freedom Grinders, and Veterans Helping Veterans.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Here I am, soaring over the confusion with my superpowers of truth. Go look out the window, and you'll see me soaring over the confusion out there.
Your tights at the dry cleaners, though?
Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, and then the editorial also points out that the governor asked to withdraw the bill. Now, where does a governor get off at telling a senator that she should withdraw a bill?
Isn't they called a veto?
Yeah. Very, very bad performance, Governor.
It sounds like someone who gave in to the extortion.
Exactly.
It's causing too much controversy. They wrote a letter. Just let's stop talking about it.
People are upset, and you know there's no agreement here, so we've got to stop doing this. Yeah.
I wash my hands.
Withdrawing the legislation now isn't the best move forward for the public transparency's sake. Many have provided public input for or against the legislation. Canceling the voices of those who have taken time to voice their views comes across as undemocratic. Senators can and should continue the legislative process of seeking public input, and when it wraps up, each senator can vote yes or no or stay silent. No. You got to vote yes or no. You can't stay silent. If there are enough votes to send the legislation to our Democrat governor, it will be her turn to take a stand. That's how the system's designed, Governor, not for you to engage in legislative miscarriage, causing a spontaneous abortion of a bill before it even gets to the voting file. Hashing it out in a, quote, room does not necessarily promote government openness. Certainly not the way the governor does it. Okay, so today is the day for the Guam Daily Post. Congratulations, Post. You got the coveted blue star again. And let's see, that takes oops. I forgot to bring my card along with. Oh, I got it. Today's the 13th, right? Yeah. Yeah, that takes the Post up to 252 blue stars. And the Daily News is creeping along at 61. They were stuck at zero, stuck at nowhere for quite some time, so that's an improvement for them. Okay, so much for Demi and Cutney. I'm going to go to the green room where we have a secret agent, the most dangerous man in the room, effectively backed up by none other than another Joe. Okay. So tell us what you want us to know, R. Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob and Jose and Tall Tales International listening audience. I just wanted to share a few thoughts that I've been thinking about the number of people that have actually been infected on Guam, because I think there's actually a way to have a pretty fair estimate of how many have actually been infected. I'm not talking about cases, people that have been swabbed or gone into the hospital. I'm talking about how many people likely have been infected in the rough neighborhood. I mentioned a really great article I've recommended many times in Imprimis by Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who is a professor at the Stanford University School of Medicine. And in that article, he spoke about his study he did at his hometown of Santa Clara. They went out and got samples, I think it was over 3,000 or whatever, to find out how many had the antibodies. At the time, there was only about a little under 1,000 cases, people who had been swabbed or gone into the hospital, and it was shown they had the virus. So him and his team went out in the community, took their samples of 3,000 or whatever it was. They took the results and extrapolated that out, and they estimated that based on that anywhere from over 50,000 to over 85,000 people had the antibodies. In other words, they were immune from this disease. They'd gotten it, they recovered it, their antibodies were still circulating. And I've read somewhere that people who have natural immunity due to the antibodies are actually more immune than people who get the vaccine. So why is this important? It's important because do we know exactly what the long-term effects of the virus, the vaccine are? No, we don't. So, and we don't know what the effects are for people who are already immune and then get the vaccine. And there seems to be very little concern about that, and I'm kind of puzzled about it. But in this article, this excellent article in Imprimis, again, it's titled "A Sensible and Compassionate Anti-COVID Strategy" by Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. He said that the death rate for these people, this infected population, 50 to 85,000, was shown to be 0.2%. And I need to simplify things because I'm not a math whiz. So I think of 0.2%. If there are 100 people infected, 20% of a person died. And if there are 200, 40% of a person died, all the way until you get to 500. Then one person died for every 500 cases, or not cases, people who are infected. So if we take that and use that figure, and again, 83 studies verified this. The same studies about antibodies came to the same conclusion: 0.2% death rate or a survival rate of 99.8 in the general population. There was a few that were slightly less, very few that were slightly more, but the median result was 0.2% for 83 studies. So this is pretty reliable. So if we take the number that have died now on Guam, 141%, assuming we have the same death rate, that would mean, and I'm not a math whiz, and someone that is a math whiz out there can maybe call in and correct me, that we've had about 70, in the neighborhood of 70,000 people infected and have the antibodies based on this death rate, assuming it's calculated out to 0.2%. So that to me is pretty reliable based on 83 studies that we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 70,000 people on Guam infected, which I think is a very large number. I don't know what do you know what the vaccine number is right now? How many have gotten the vaccine so far?
Aren't we up to about 79.25%? Isn't that the latest?
Yeah, I've kind of lost track of exactly where we are. But, based on this, and I think it's, based on 83 studies, I think it's pretty accurate that we already had 70,000 people in the population who were already infected, and the vast majority immune. So the lack of interest in finding out who's got antibodies is it's interesting. I wish there was more interest in it, because I'd go in for one of those tests. I have a feeling I've already gotten it. But anyway, that's just a thought I wanted to.
Did you have any thoughts on the medical malpractice controversy, or Carl?
No, I'm still kind of listening to people, and of course listening to you and your callers call in and trying to figure out what side of this I would fall on. If I was in David Lebowski's place and I lost my only son, I only have one son, and it was due to something I felt looked like incompetence or negligence, I would be David Lebowski. I mean, I would have his same opinion that my son was unnecessarily killed by this, and I would feel the same. I don't know if I would have the same stick-to-itiveness and persistence that he's got. It's remarkable. He clearly loved his son very, very much and still loves his son. I don't know, Bob. I really don't. It's a tough situation. I don't want to harm good doctors.
Here's how it comes out then. Both sides are going to claim you as an ally. And here's how it's going to go. The Lebowskiites are going to say, obviously our Carl is on our side because he says he's got an open mind, so that means he's not with the other side. And the doctors are going to say, we're doing pretty well because the most dangerous man in the room hasn't come out in favor of the other side. So I think we're doing pretty well. So you'd be the ally of both. You can't lose this one, Carl.
Well, let me not be so wishy-washy then and say that I've commented to one of the doctors who's on Facebook that until this issue is resolved, and I think there does need to be change, this is going to come back again. They may sweep it under the rug. They may, try to, and they may succeed this time. It's not going to go away. We've all got horror stories of things that have happened, those rare stories where doctors have done really bad things. I tend to come down on the side of George Macris. If I had to choose right now, I think he is very competent. He has been on Guam. He has held positions of responsibility, and I like what he said. I tend to think something has to happen, and to just try to squash this lawsuit and say, okay, everything's back to usual, I don't think it's going to work. Some kind of reform needs to happen. I don't know if it's Bill 112, but something's got to happen.
Well, you heard it here first, out there in the international radio listening audience. Our Carl has said this situation cannot endure. So thank you very much for your ruling. Most dangerous man in the room. As usual, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Same here, Bob.
Okay, we got to take a short break here and come back. We'll come back from the break to another Joe who wants to talk about differing philosophies of medicine. That should be pretty interesting.
Mescla, read all about it. Check out Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win, Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th through July 21st, weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car will be given away to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today.
Okay, so here we go. This may be the high point of the show. A chat with, not with Joe, not with the real Joe Cruz, but with none other than another Joe.
Bob, don't put me in the spot. I'll get stage fright.
You'll be all right, another Joe.
All right, so
so long as you can stay away from compact impact, you got it, man.
Okay, I'll do my best. So I agree with the most dangerous guy. They should have more antibody testing. As a matter of fact, they should have antibody certification. Say, hey, guess what? I was found to have the Wuhan coronavirus 19 virus. Was this immunity? Pandemic immunity antibodies, and then they can. I was gonna say put you on payroll, but no. What I meant was they can keep you. They can keep testing you, right, to see if you develop mutated antibodies for the mutated strains of the Wuhan coronavirus, Corona 19 virus. And every time you develop a new more antibodies for each mutated strain, they can add that to your antibody certification passport.
I got a question, another Joe.
Yes, sir.
Didn't you want to talk about the differing philosophies of medicine?
I apologize, sir. I got off on tangent there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I think it started out. There's a lot of distinguishing between Eastern and Western philosophies, right? All across the board, including medicine, right? And so these are different attitudes as to how to approach socializing and whether, including with medicine, right? And Western philosophy of medicine, they usually just treat the symptoms. The Eastern philosophy of medicine, they usually treat the bigger picture, right? Everything, not just the symptoms. But it's difficult to get it recognized by Western philosophy. They're starting to come around and say, hey, food is medicine. If you eat proper, healthy foods, right, then you will have to eat medicine as much as you get older and your immune system becomes weaker. But yeah, Eastern philosophy kind of feels like Eastern versus Western philosophy because it kind of includes some form of socializing and not acknowledging but accepting of a certain perceptions. Like if you go to stateside, how many families rather, or how many patients have families sitting in with the patient like almost 24/7, right? Stateside, but here in Guam, you see that something like that on a regular basis, and it's not a bad thing all the time. Before the pandemic, if someone's really old, really sick in the hospital, you would see one of the relatives with them in the room, staying with them on a regular basis. Hey, man, taking a lot of your time, Bob. I appreciate you letting me have time, and I guess I'll give someone else a chance before the halftime show. But thanks for your time.
Okay, another Joe.
That was an interesting take on the PDN, I think. The PDN's editorial, where they said we need more vaccinations, but there's that different philosophy is, well, we wouldn't need the vaccinations if we were healthy to begin with, because the survival rate of the Wuhan virus is pretty good.
I heard just yesterday, and I don't remember where I heard it. I think it was a doctor saying that the population of Guam is very unhealthy. High blood pressure, high cholesterolemia.
I'm pointing at myself.
Diabetic, on and on and on. And those are what are referred to as diseases of civilization. If you went back to pre-World War II Guam, everybody walked out to the ranch, worked hard all day, got a lot of good exercise.
You could fit more people in a 4x6 photo.
Exactly. And ate, the stuff, mostly ate stuff that they could grow on the ranch, right? And maybe once a month or once every couple of months, there would be a big shindig, a fiesta or whatever. But you probably had to walk 10 miles to get there and walk 10 miles to get home, and it was only once in a while. So people were much leaner and probably much healthier then than they are now, even with all of our modern medicine, because, you know, we've, with the advent of the American administration, people on Guam discovered the Twinkie, which, you know, is one of the 4 food groups, right? Twinkies.
It'll last forever.
Yeah. Yeah, so another Joe made a pretty good point there, that's for sure. Okay, so let's go from there to the card. And here's what I've got on the card. Let's see here. I've got repeat performances here of Therese versus the Chief Justice and Therese versus the Governor. And then Edward Lear, Esquire, versus Therese. We're not going to hear much about Edward Lear's 3 daughters, I don't think. This will not be Shakespearean.
No.
Yeah. And then Bustamante versus Doctors. And then I've got Ruckus versus Decorum. When I first heard about Ruckus, I thought it was one of our what do we call them? Habitual residents from Southern Islands, Ruckus. And then House Appropriation Committee versus Guam, and Wolf versus Journalism, which is a holdover from yesterday. So launching right into the card, I start out here with Edward Lear versus Therese. And I'll get to the Ruckus a little later on, but if you didn't happen to watch last night's hearing, Edward Lear came along, and he was billed as a California lawyer who came out here to, you know, like so many Californians do, came out here to set us straight here on this little island, right? And he said that he is an ace in problem solving. He didn't come out here to advocate one position or another. He came out here to help us kind of come to a solution of this problem. And he said he was brought out here by a medical group here on the island. So he launched into his testimony. He turned me off instantly with his PowerPoint. If you ever want to present something anywhere and you don't want the host of Tall Tales to give you much heed, do a PowerPoint. PowerPoint has done more to ruin the art of public speaking than Janella Carrera with her mute button. PowerPoints are horrible. And back in the golden days of the legislature, when I had a committee, committee chairman can promulgate rules. Nobody ever does, but I did. And one of my rules was, we don't need no stinking PowerPoints. You know, if you're gonna come in, you got to be able to explain it, or maybe you don't want to come to that particular hearing. And historically, imagine where we would have been with PowerPoint. Can you imagine Abraham Lincoln in 1864, a year after Gettysburg? 77 years ago. The math is on the screen up here behind me.
In the crowd, they're whispering, he's just reading his card. He's just reading what's on the slide.
He's just reading the slide, which is what you do, I guess, if you do PowerPoint.
Can you just email me the printout? Just email me the PowerPoint.
Yeah, because he's only reading the card. So he got off to a really bad start with me like that. And then he told us that he was this great problem solver. By the time he got done with his self-laudatory comments, Therese was the speaker was telling him, okay, your 3 minutes are up. He is a lawyer, so naturally he was contentious, right? And he didn't want to stop talking. He had the mic in front of him, and finally he had to be escorted from the room. Yeah, which is something you don't see every day. So here's the story on Edward Lee. I'm sorry, Edward Lear. Edward Lear was admitted. Well, let's take a short break, and I'll come back to Edward Lear right after the break.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Texas Democrats walk again. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Bolting the state capitol in Austin to block the Texas state legislature from acting on a voter reform measure, which, among other things, would require an ID to get an absentee ballot. 51 of the lawmakers have flown to Washington, D.C., and they say they plan to stay until an emergency session of the legislature comes to an end.
We are going to use that time to plead with our friends and our colleagues and our leaders in the Congress that the time is now. There is no more time. You must pass strong federal voter protection legislation.
Democrat Texas Representative Guy Turner, but Texas Governor Greg Abbott says they'll have to return to Texas sooner or later.
Once they step back into the state of Texas, they will be arrested and brought to the Texas Capitol, and we will be conducting business.
The Democrats also walked out in late May to prevent action on a voter reform bill. The dramatic rise in violent crime in several cities, the topic of a White House meeting Monday with federal law enforcement and community leaders. President Biden telling the group,
"We recognize that we have to come together to fulfill the first responsibility of a democracy, and to keep each other safe. And that's what the American people are looking for when it comes to reducing violent crime and gun violence."
The administration's response so far has been to announce a crackdown on gun dealers who don't follow federal gun laws related to background checks. The Centers for Disease Control says the risk is extremely small, but they're issuing a warning that some people who've received the Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine have reported muscle weakness and, in some cases, paralysis. Only about 100 cases reported among the nearly 13 million people who've received the J&J vaccine. In China, rescuers are scrambling to find survivors in the collapse of a 54-room hotel. At least 8 people have been killed. Several people are still reported as missing. America is listening to Fox News.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Bank Pacific. Happy 67th anniversary. Viva Bank Pacific!
Bank Pacific, serving our Pacific communities for 67 years. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vaccine Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vaccine Win, Guam!
President Biden still trying to garner support for his multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure plan.
President Biden is likely going to need to rely on a budget reconciliation package, a large spending bill to make good on proposals for expanded pre-K, community college, and health care programs.
I'm going to fight to make that proposal as robust as it can be.
Senate Budget Committee Chairman Bernie Sanders met for about an hour with the president on pressing ahead with legislation to help pay for trillions of dollars in new spending. But even a reconciliation bill that can be passed without Republican support would need to unite all 50 Senate Democrats on a dollar figure. and tax rates. At the White House, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Gasoline prices have soared to their highest average price in 7 years, reaching $3.15 a gallon on a national average, according to the AAA. As the economy reopens and more people hit the road, a Connecticut high school student has been charged with a crime for allegedly inserting an Adolf Hitler quote into the school's yearbook.
The 18-year-old boy, who has not been identified, is charged with 2 counts of third-degree computer crime for allegedly hacking into a database and inserting the quote, which reads, "It is a quite special secret pleasure how the people around us fail to realize what is really happening to them." He attributed the quote in the yearbook to George Floyd, who died with a cop's knee on his neck in Minneapolis last year. The yearbook has been recalled by the school. In a statement, administrators said they regret not having caught the act of bigotry. The teen will appear in court in early August. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
The Vatican says Pope Francis will spend a few more days in the hospital to optimize his recovery and rehabilitation treatment after having intestinal surgery last week. The Pope could be released by the end of this week. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Chili's is pairing up premium entrees with 2-in-1 entree selections starting at $19.99. Indulge in mouth-watering combos like the sirloin and ribs combo, the ribeye and jalapeno sausage combo, or the savory sirloin and ancho salmon combo. All served with delicious mashed potatoes. Dine in today and enjoy the best of both worlds flavor experience with Chili's 2-in-1 entree selections. Available for a limited time. Chili's on the 2nd floor of the Tumont Sands Plaza. Chili's, savor the moment.
Hey! Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Pastrami is back at Subway. Pepper-crusted beef layered with crispy pickles, mustard, and melted provolone cheese. Nothing comes close to the pleasure of sinking your teeth into that chewy, juicy, well-seasoned pastrami. It's happiness in a sub. Head down to the nearest Subway restaurant and satisfy your craving for the deli perfection that is pastrami. Subway. Eat fresh. Pastrami sub is available to all Subway locations on Guam and Saipan, including NCS, for a limited time only.
Great halftime show here on Tall Tales. They just get better and better every day, don't they? And now we are starting the second half of Tall Tales on this Tuesday afternoon. And the item on the card is Edward Lear versus Therese. And before the break, I told you that Edward Lear was admitted to the bar in California in 1987. He's a Dartmouth grad. I can't remember where he went to law school. Probably a California school. And he told another radio talk show host, believe it or not, Ray and I are not the only ones on the island.
You're the only ones that matter.
Just because we're the best, yeah. That he was brought out here by Nate Berg, Dr. Nate Berg. Yeah, so I want to stop on that just for a second. I did see Nate Berg on TV last night at the hearing. I've been a Nate Berg fan for a long, long time. He runs a class act down at his clinic And in my estimation, if Nate Berg does it, it's going to be done right. I had one experience myself where I just couldn't have been more pleased with the way he approached the practice of medicine. If everyone were like that, we wouldn't even need to have the word malpractice in our vocabulary. But I was really surprised at the way he demonized Speaker Terlahi last night in the hearing. I was surprised and I was disappointed, because I've gone to great lengths to point out that Therese is doing exactly what a good senator should do. A good senator finds the controversial issues where there are divided opinions, does some research, works on a bill that would address the concerns of the people, introduces it, and sells it. That's what we expect senators to do, and we shouldn't demonize them for doing that if the bill that is introduced happens to be one that we don't like. So I was kind of taken aback by that. But he brought this guy, from what I've been able to understand, Lear said on camera, I was brought out here by a physicians group to solve problems, not to advocate a point of view, etc. And then he went in, spent whatever time that he had tearing apart Bill 112 in the name of solving the problem. So when I heard that, I did a little research, and here we go. He's a 1983 graduate cum laude of Dartmouth College. He's an Ivy Leaguer, and a 1987 graduate of UCLA School of Law. I guess he couldn't get into New Mexico, where he was a member of the Law Review and the Moot Court Honors Program. He joined a firm called Thielen, Marin, Johnson, and Bridges immediately after law school and worked for 4 years as a, quote, big firm litigation associate before becoming a Los Angeles-based state bar prosecutor, prosecuting other lawyers. Yeah. For 3 years, Lear prosecuted California attorneys, never losing a trial. How to win friends and influence people. Before co-founding a firm called Gary and Lear in 1994. In 2002, Lear founded Century Law Group. Lear has tried over 150 cases. He is a recognized speaker at legal and real estate seminars, has published numerous articles, and has been qualified as an expert witness in state and federal courts. Mr. Lear served as a commissioner for the city of Manhattan Beach from 2000 to 2008. Since 2008, Lear has served as elected chairman of the Manhattan Beach Unified School District Bond Oversight Committee. What a title. Supervising the expenditure and allocation of over $60 million of bond proceeds. So when I heard that he was brought out here by somebody else, I did a little research, because we do regulate lobbying here. We have a statute in the books. 2 GCA Chapter 8 regulates lobbying. And lobbyist means any activity by a lobbyist. Well, that's a good definition. Any activity by a lobbyist, right? Which is reasonably designed to influence the passage, defeat, or content of any legislation, including meeting with legislators or employees of legislators, providing information and draft legislation to legislators or employees, publishing any articles or editorials in favor of the passage or defeat of any legislation, organizing groups of members of the public to engage in activities described above, paying for any amenities or expenses of legislators or staff, procuring goods, services from vendors in exchange for the passage, defeat, or content of any legislation. Now, the key part here is the very beginning of the statute says that a lobbyist means any person who engages for pay in any amount. So if you do any of the things that I mentioned and you got paid to do it, right? Now there are some non-definitions. Lobbyist and lobbying does not apply to a member of the public appearing before a committee of the legislature in support or opposition to legislation, a member of the public who contacts their elected officials, government officials or designee acting in their official capacity, government employees providing information on legislation, reporters, employees, et cetera, engaged in regular reporting on news, editorials, et cetera, or other commentaries concerning legislation, provided that the reporter, employee, or owner does not engage in further other activities in connection with the passage or defeat of legislation other than appearing before a committee and submitting testimony. Paid advertisements are okay. Campaign contributions are okay. Volunteers are okay. So I suspect that Mr. Lear, it does not come within the ambit of the definition of a lobbyist because it's not included in the definition. It is included in the non-definition. And then we have a procedure for registration if you are a lobbyist. You got to put down all kinds of information, et cetera. So I don't think that Mr. Lear is a lobbyist, at least from what he did last night. Okay, so we've got someone, it's probably Mr. Lear on the phone, right? It's Dr. Vince Akimoto. Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Vince Akimoto. Did you want to testify here on Tall Tales?
Actually, I wanted to ask you a question because you've been on a roll, Judge Klitzkie. I mean, the legal education that you are dispensing through this medium should help a lot of future lawyers get into law school and hopefully pass the bar. Because I mean, we've actually been making it a point in my house to listen to your broadcast, many days later, because we have to look up all these big words you keep saying. But
my favorite is this one, Vince. Sesquipedal. I like to use sesquipedal words. You're wondering, what does that mean? Well, sesqui means 1.5, right? As in, sometimes cities have a sesquicentennial celebration when they've been around for 150 years. Sesqui means 1.5. Pedal, of course, means foot. So a sesquipedal word is a word that's 1.5 foot long. I like to use those. Pardon the interruption.
No, that's a beautiful word. I was thinking that it was maybe some sort of parasite that you treat with ivermectin. Like a horse parasite or something like that.
Close.
But, I guess the question that I wanted to ask is because you made the statement that Speaker Terlahi was performing like a good senator should, and she is the Speaker of the legislature, so obviously she has the support of her colleagues. And then it does look like they easily have a majority of the legislature already signed on to vote yes on this modification to the mandatory arbitration law. And so the discussions that we've been having lately are really more for, I guess, educational purposes. Some people are yelling that this is necessary and right, and then other people are yelling that this is going to destroy the health care of Guam. And then now some people are paying for people from Manhattan Beach to come and, I guess, and it sounds like this guy is really well trained and probably has been schooled on proper etiquette. So I'm thinking that yesterday's thing where he went over the 5 minutes, that was premeditated. It had some sort of legal purpose. And so the real question, I know I'm asking several questions, but is this the I mean, if this is appropriate topic for a senator to tackle because it's controversial and it's what people want to talk about. I mean, the healthcare system on Guam has several other issues that are at least equally important, one of which would be the actual function of that healthcare system, to include the hospital that mainly serves the poor, or supposedly, and it certainly serves majority of the COVID poor, people who have COVID and are poor at the same time. They're going to wind up at GMH. And GMH has been on fire. I mean, it literally doesn't function as a safe hospital. It's been told that many times. And although there's an ongoing effort to make it better, no one ever told the senators or the legislature or the people of Guam or the patients who use it that place is any good. I mean, we perform miracles there every day, but since this discussion that we're having is all about divisiveness and honesty and just laying things out in the open, as painful as it might be, we have a really crappy hospital for the people of Guam. It's failed safety inspections. It has a leaking roof. It's cracked, apparently in half. The operating room has poop running down its ceilings and walls because there are sewage pipes above the operating room desk. I mean, there's a multitude of structural engineering and just hygienic realities that a good senator should probably bring to the floor. I mean, not to mention the complete waste of the people's resources in terms of political hires. I mean, if it's appropriate for a senator to bring up issues that are difficult to discuss, right, which is Speaker Tlaib is doing, this budget hearing that we're having for the hospital should speak to the 300 people that have no business and have no purpose helping the people of Guam and are taking a tremendous amount of hospital resources that would otherwise go towards fixing the elevators, fixing the toilets, fixing, the leaking walls. So which is it? Is it important for senators to stand up for issues that, as difficult as it may be? Or is it for senators to pick on issues that are going to essentially chase away the doctors and nurses? Because I can't see anybody looking at this as an advertisement for doctors and nurses to stay on Guam. What we were witnessing were blatant attacks on the integrity, on the honesty, on the, the true motivation of doctors and nurses in Guam. And it came pretty clear from certain voices that they think the doctors and nurses in Guam are only here to make money off the death, pain, and suffering
Are you talking about
of the people of Guam.
Are you talking about witnesses or senators, Doc?
It felt like Joanne Brown was mouthing that off. I mean, I didn't get any warm and fuzzies from her, and she made it clear that she had heard from the people that the doctors on Guam were bad actors. And so she was there to hear them out. And even Mr. Duenas, who was, trying to run for governor at the end with his, kumbaya statement, I mean, they're all saying that clearly there are problems and they're there to help people sort through the problems. And the problem that apparently exists is that poor people can't sue doctors fast enough on Guam, and they're angry about it. That was the main issue that the legislature, these senators, chose to focus on for the last 2 weeks. And the hospital's broken. Public health is homeless. Their building burnt down and was condemned by Public Works 3 years ago, right prior to the 2 years ago, right prior to the pandemic. The governor is wisely talking about building a new facility 10 years from now, $1 billion. So the senators have not discussed the merits of that, nor have they discussed how to fix the current problems. I guess I'm puzzled, but I'm also bemused because this is going to continue. There's going to be a third hearing, and maybe more lawyers will be imported from Dartmouth. But if they're planning to if their solution to this is theatrics, then this is going to get pretty interesting.
Well, if you followed along here, this kerfuffle that we're involved in right now, in my mind, goes back to one guy who had a really bad experience, David Lavosky. And if you were listening last night, you heard George Mackworth read into the record the findings of was it the Medicare folks, et cetera. It was really, really a sad story. And he's been stirring the pot to the point that we are where we are right now. So,
well, I think, yeah.
hold on a second, Vince.
Yeah. Sure.
I sometimes I have to lay a foundation before I make a point.
Oh, okay.
If we had a doctor or two that stirred the pot the same way that Lebowski has stirred it over the death of his unfortunate son, then perhaps it would be the kind of thing that a senator would latch onto. But, you know, in a sense, the legislature is like a great big toad. It just sits it just sits there and eats flies until someone comes along and pokes it with a stick. So Lebowski had that stick, and I would love to see some doctors who weren't affiliated with the hospital or with the government come along and start doing that same kind of poking, because you're absolutely right. So what you're saying is, how does the legislature determine what the priorities are when it comes to health care? And you're saying because they're starting out at the wrong place. And I couldn't agree with you more. But it is a deliberative body, and it's kind of like I don't remember if it's flotsam or jetsam. It kind of depends on prevailing winds, tides, currents, et cetera, as to which way it goes. And the winds, tides, and currents are not blowing it towards, we need to do something about our hospital.
That's incredible for anybody to come to that conclusion in the middle of a pandemic where 141 people died, most of them in that hospital. And then there were other people who died, including, Mr. Lebowski's son, in a hospital that was already determined to be unsafe. And in fact, I don't think Mr. Lebowski's wrong to bring up these issues, but he's personalized it as if those two doctors that worked there, those two doctors that didn't come in when their sons were called, actually were agents of the hospital. Those were private sector doctors who had the choice, I believe, to come in or not. I mean, if we're going to be really plain about it, if I call you to come into someplace and I don't come, if you didn't pay me to come, why would I come? I mean, the thing is that there was no contractual for any people to come in and save anybody's butt that night, except for the people that were working at the hospital, and they weren't capable of doing it because they don't have the talent to do it. They don't have the training or the credibility or the desire to save sick children in the middle of the night. So they call private sector doctors who have better training and better motivation to come in. But when they don't come in, who holds them accountable?
No hospitalists, Vince?
At that point in time, I don't believe they existed. And even tonight, I mean, if you go in and you want an orthopedic doctor to fix your broken leg, good luck. There isn't anybody in the house, right? I mean, there's very few specialists in the house at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so for people to have the expectation that just because you whine, piss, and moan about it, that it's going to be there, I mean, after this debacle that Speaker Terlai has perpetrated, there will be less. And more than that, what has been made clear is stay in your lane. Don't go beyond your training or whatever you want to do. Don't be innovative. Don't take any risks. Don't try too hard. They'll stay home because very few people are trained to deal with things they've never dealt with before, including COVID. COVID is a novel virus. The things that it does, no one's seen before. So, a good malpractice attorney, should be able to sue the heck out of everybody. All those 141 deaths should make somebody pretty rich. The fallacy is that this is a business and that it's about money. And, that's, I think that's the most hurtful thing is that the speaker and Joanne Brown and all these, I want to say apartheid, but it's really, there's another term that you call when they come across the aisle, bipartisan. They are bipartisanly bought into the idea that the doctors on Guam are greedy and are only here to make a quick buck. I'm not sure if they got the zip code right. That would probably be more like Beverly Hills or Manhattan or someplace like that. But Guam, as I see it, is an underserved medical community. This is not an easy place to do anything. The people that are here are generally here because they love the people, and the people have just told them to go to hell. I mean, this is going to end a very specific way, and I'm not sure that that was the intended consequence. some people are saying they want better health care, and they plan to do it by suing doctors who don't show up when they're called. They won't have that problem very much longer because there are going to be fewer doctors to call, and it won't make the hospital any cleaner. It won't fix the broken ceiling. It won't fix the electrical panel that's apparently, going to kill somebody. These senators
Vince,
are committing.
Vince, I don't have my pitch pipe here, so I couldn't hit the right tone. You'll have to take my word for it that you're preaching to the choir. But
I'm actually talking to Speaker Terlahi through you. I'm trying to make it clear to her that she has committed some sort of senatorial malpractice. But I guess that's the thing. It's all in the spirit of trying to do what you can to help the people, right? I mean, it's like the doctors who show up.
And I want to point out something else to you. There are 10 co-sponsors left after bailout Barnes shoved off. But as my old Aunt Florence used to say, there are many a slip between cup and lip. The fact that 10 people sign on to a bill doesn't even mean that the bill will get to the floor, and it doesn't mean that all of them will stick with the bill, which finally comes to the floor. So this isn't an exercise in futility for the doctors to go down and testify. I think they're having the kind of impact that they want to have. And I don't know if you've heard me frame the issue, but I think I framed it in a means that's satisfactory to you. But maybe you could help me with the other side of the issue. I wanted to go to medical school when I was younger, but I couldn't. You know why? My handwriting wasn't bad enough.
Oh, pa-dum-pum. Well, we can fix that.
Yeah.
There's something called the electronic medical record. It'll help make everybody.
I thought you were thinking maybe of a hammer or a mallet or something.
No.
But
I appreciate you giving me the time. But you can be an honorary doctor of Guam, and then they'll think that you're greedy and only want to kill people.
So look at it from the standpoint of my profession. Lawyers think that the doors, in fact, the statute says the courthouse is always open. So if lawyers have a bias, it's in favor of people having access to the courts to litigate their own particular grievances, problems, whatsoever. And of course, you keep hearing about people saying, well, because of the MMAA, I'm not going to be able to file that. I can't get into the courthouse. So that's a concern from the other side. Do you have any possible solution to that?
Well, yeah, it's called call the police. I mean, what they were saying was not about the inconvenience that they had in filing any civil suits. What I heard, and maybe my ears need to be cleaned, is they were worried that the doctors were getting away with murder and mayhem, that they were maiming people, that they were leaving people on hold, that they were committing either battery, assault, or manslaughter. I don't know. They were talking about crimes.
I think that the way that sorts out is this, and I explained this on the show, that tort law has a couple of functions. One function is that it redistributes loss. The other function is that it's supposed to have a deterrent effect. And there are those in the community who say that doctors who feel that they're insulated from malpractice litigation are not deterred from doing things that they ought to be deterred from. Now, I'm not going to weigh in on that. I'm not going to rule on that. But I think that's the reason that some people think it's necessary to come to the legislature with their terribles and horribles. Not that they want to punish the doctors. It's just that they would like not to have these things happen again. As far as calling the police, if a doctor operates on a patient or does certain other things without the patient's informed consent, it is, in fact, a battery. An unprivileged touching is a battery.
Well, what they're talking about is people killing their son, people killing, a dentist, maiming, permanently leaving them with permanent pain. Those those are crimes, aren't they not? I mean, if, in the way that they're talking about it, they're saying these are unwanted consequences. That's not what they paid for.
Well, there's a difference between medical malpractice and a crime, and you know and ordinarily, in order for something to be a crime, there has to be what's called mens rea, the intention to commit a crime. Now, sometimes gross negligence in the right circumstance can be a crime, but I think you'd have a hard time finding a doctor who was ever prosecuted based on something that he did where he was grossly negligent.
Again, the allegation seems to be that the doctors, their a priori motivation is simply to bilk these people out of money, whether they get better or not. So their a priori intention is simply to take their money.
Are you sure you're not? Are you sure you're not overgeneralizing there?
No, I mean, you listen to the tape. These people were very, very clear, black and white, that they believe that there are doctors that they have had to endure their care that were simply there for profit, that they weren't there for medical care. They were simply there to take their money, as if these people were charlatans, that they're not true doctors. There was questioning whether or not these people even had the right to be doctors in Guam, because, you know, they probably graduated the last in their class, and we'd be better off bringing people from Taiwan or the Philippines. I mean,
did you read George Macris's column in the paper, Vince? George Macris had some pretty uncomplimentary things about his brother medicos.
Yeah, George Macris is also not taking care of any people on Guam anymore, and there's a good reason why. I mean, good enough for him. George is my friend, I believe, and I understand his. He is basically one of the doctors, like me, who believes the doctors on Guam need to do a better job of policing themselves. There's no doubt. But what I'm hearing now, disappointingly, from Joanne Brown and from Therese Terlahi, is they believe that applies to all doctors. They can't think of a single good thing to say about this thing, and therefore this has become the priority. You know, it's really about timing, right? It's about what did you put first. If this was not true, if they did not feel that this was the biggest problem that healthcare was facing, that we have a whole bunch of rogue, renegade, rotten doctors that are killing people on purpose, you would have probably prioritized this differently and maybe couched the conversation differently, except they convinced 10 other senators to come with them, basically with pitchforks. I mean, the doctors that were enduring what has happened over the last couple of days, and this is not a constructive conversation. I don't know anybody who has that disillusion.
Vince,
it's not a constructive conversation.
Vince, should Jose be beeping the horn as you're going through your list of what might be characterized as exaggerations, remembering that exaggeration for effect is actually my job, not yours?
Well, I used to be a radio show host, and I listened to a lot of Rush Limbaugh, so okay. I kind of know what people listen for. So hopefully now they're listening and saying Therese Terlahi and Joanne Brown at the same time very loudly and frequently is my way of getting, basically the dog whistle going. Look, you need to hear what we're saying. You've made a big mess, and it's worse. And we are in the middle of a pandemic. And if you thought that this was the first and most important thing you needed to do, good luck to you.
I wish I would have heard some doctors. The doctors that I heard had a couple of strong suits: virtue signaling, right, and righteousness preeming. But if a couple of doctors had come along and said what you just said, Bill 112 is something, and there may be a problem there that you think needs to be fixed. But I would submit to you, Speaker Terlahi, that the biggest problem we have is our hospital and 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it would have been extremely powerful testimony coming from.
I have 3 years of newspaper articles saying exactly that.
I'm saying at the hearing, because so much of the testimony. Well, I came back to Guam to serve my people. And I can do this, and I can do that, and, this is going to be the ruination of not only my life, but medical practice. If a couple of doctors had come along and said what you just said, I think it would have perhaps had a very dramatic effect on the.
Well, then I'll tell you, sir, that unfortunately those conversations did happen with Speaker Terlahi. Not necessarily with Joanne Brown. I'm very disappointed in her. I mean, she could have reached out to us, but Speaker Terlahi, no doubt, and Tella Terlahi.
At the hearing, or
no, way before that. This thing has been
that's
going
what I'm talking about. I'm talking about at the hearing, because we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, except that we really don't like it. I mean, talking as members of the public. So, what I'm saying is, if a couple of doctors had come out and said that at the hearing, I think that would have had a profound effect.
Hey, look, I got a chance to do it next week. I could do it next week, but I'm glad I got a chance to do it on your show. Sorry to take up so much time. Looks like the music in the background means I got to go.
Yeah, you're always welcome, Vince.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good talking to you. Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
So long. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs, and let's see, when we get out of Churchill Downs, we're still going to have 20 minutes left. I'm sorry, not Churchill Downs. It's not that time yet. It's only time for the 7th inning stretch, so let's head for Wrigley Field, and I'll see if I can find our Carl stumbling around in the outfield at Wrigley Field.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Okay, so here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's, most beautiful ballpark. And I just want to peek at Facebook here for a second. And here's what we got. Jose Martinez said, to me, the aggressive pushback set the current narrative. The doctor's aggressive pushback.
You were talking about being on the fence and wanting to listen to everything. And then the pushback was like, oh, this is interesting.
Uh-huh. And then Jose has a theme for today's show. The theme for today's show is hyperbole. And then we go on down a little bit farther here. And Troy Torres says, Shea and the SDA clinic, very aggressive stances started this whole thing. And then we've got Simon Sanchez, who says, great discussion. And then he said, the public discussion spurred by Bill 112 in the legislative process is essential to determining what the public thinks before elected representatives act. Exactly, yeah. So once again, you can't always depend on the senators doing the right thing, but you can almost always depend on tailgaters doing the right thing, right?
You know, surprisingly, I find myself, not surprisingly, but I do find myself agreeing with a lot of what Dr. Akimoto is saying.
Yes.
But I don't think we have to do one and not the other. we could probably do both.
Really, yeah.
The hospital and this need to have accountability.
And then you come back to this old hackneyed expression about squeaky wheels and grease and everything. And doctors, a squad of doctors who have hospital privileges coming forward to really lay it out on the hospital would really have a dramatic effect. But like Macra said, we've got the health providers mafia and the code of omerta, right? And that works against the interests that that Dr. Akimoto would like to see move forward. Troy Torres said Dr. Greedo, one of the two doctors, was and is a GMH employee. Vince said that he wasn't a GMH employee. I don't know. But I can tell you that the way that the average person's mind works, you go to the hospital, you see doctors. One of the things that's hard for people to understand who don't understand the system, I went to the hospital, and when I got out, they gave me a choice of either mortgaging my home or leaving one of my arms and legs behind. The bill was so high. So I figured out a payment schedule, and then the next day or next week, I got a bill from the doctor in the mail. What did I pay all that money to the hospital for? So this distinction between the doctor, the hospital, the lab, and some of these other things, I understand it because I've actually spent some time thinking about it and studying it. But I think for most people, something bad happened. A doctor caused something bad to happen in the hospital. Oh, it's got to be the hospital's fault. And once again, doctors have the ability at public hearings to explain some of these things. But anyhow, I'm really glad Vince called. He has a lot to say. And practicing what I preach for the legislature, the way we accomplish things here on Tall Tales is we have people that have strong opinions. If you have strong opinions about these things, this is the number to call. Nobody here on Tall Tales is going to say, well, that's interesting, but, maybe we shouldn't talk about that. That's not Tall Tales. Talking about things we shouldn't talk about, let's go to the most dangerous man in the room who's riding on the merry-go-round the second time, but because of his specialized training, he can ride the merry-go-round over and over again and never get dizzy. Right, Carl?
I'm getting used to it, little by little. Yeah, I just wanted to call up and add a comment. I said that I liked what Dr. Macri said, and I think he had a point. And obviously, he's a very qualified doctor. He held positions of responsibility within the medical community, the Guam Medical Association. So I tend to trust his judgment. But what I said wasn't an indictment of all doctors. Dr. Akimoto at one point was my wife's doctor for several years, even when she was dying of cancer. And our experience was very positive. My wife really liked Dr. Akimoto a great deal, as do I. I remember I was at the hospital one evening many years, one night. It was between 10 and 11. I don't know if my mom was in the hospital or my wife was, but this was 10 or 11 at night, and I saw Dr. Akimoto making his rounds at 10 or 11 at night, and I just shook my head, and I was thinking, man, how do doctors do this stuff? Good grief. It's, I have great respect for doctors in general, but I don't think Dr. Macris was making a wholesale indictment of all doctors. Dr. Macris is a doctor, and I'm pretty sure he thinks he's a good doctor. I'm sure he is.
Yeah, he made that clear. He said most really are taken aback when their patients suffer morbidity or mortality. And he said, but there are some who just couldn't care less.
Yeah, just like any profession. I mean, there are good and bad teachers. I've had both. And I could tell you stories about that. But and they're good and bad doctors, and I'm sure Dr. Akamoto would agree. I think he's, kind of gotten upset with some of the tone of the debate, but in my case, it's not an indictment of most doctors. By far, the most doctors are very competent, and I've had good experiences with them. But I did have one bad experience, not with a doctor, but ironically, with what Dr. Akamoto was talking about. It was the medical system at GMH, and my wife got very, very sick. They used her port on her chest to access, to give medication, and they neglected to close off where they inserted a J-hook to put the hose into to feed the chemicals in, and they did not take off the J-hook afterward, and so some Pseudomonas virus, which is very dangerous, got into her system, and over the course of several weeks, she started to experience symptoms like she was at the North Pole for like a half hour at a time, and eventually she became delirious, and she was in the process of dying. And fortunately I went to the clinic, her chemo clinic, and one of the nurses figured I think she might have an infection, so they did pick it up and they saved her. But I wrote to the then general manager at GMH, telling of the incident, and I wrote to JACO, the certifying body, and both of them, after a few weeks, wrote back and said they looked into it and they found nothing there. And so I wasn't interested in suing them. I just wanted my wife's experience to count for something, that other people wouldn't go through the same thing. That's my personal kind of horror story that I had to deal with, almost losing my wife. But anyway, I just wanted to comment on that and qualify my comments. I greatly respect Dr. Akamoto and most of the doctors I've dealt with.
Got you, Carl. I got to head for Churchill Downs. See you later.
This Liberation Day, join PBS Guam as we take you village to village, paying tribute to those who've made sacrifices for us to live as we do today. Tune in on July 21st at 9 a.m. and experience over 3 hours of exclusive interviews, musical performances, and more. This celebration of Guam's 77th will air on PBS Guam, KGTF, Channel 12, and streaming on the PBS Guam Facebook and YouTube pages. This special broadcast is made possible by PBS Guam, our generous supporters, and Choice Broadcasting.
Mezcla, Mezcla, read all about it. Check out Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
So here we are at Churchill Downs, the home stretch of Tall Tales today. It means I got about 8 more minutes to wrap up another exciting, illuminating, elucidating, educational episode of Tall Tales. Peeked at Facebook again, and a guy named Robbie Cabresa says, between Shay's shameless self-promotion and this guy's over-the-top dramatics, the docs are losing ground. Not that matters, not that that disappoints me. So Robbie says, as far as the battle for public opinion is concerned, those two things are not helping you very much. Let's see what else I got on Facebook here before I go to the next item on the card. Simon Sanchez, the hospital's long-standing problems are not a reason not to take up this issue. There will always be multiple issues with our health care, and no one bill solves all problems. You'll often have to tackle pieces of a complex problem, or else you never solve anything waiting for the one answer to all our health care problems. Yeah, good point. And then Jose Martinez chimes in, and I said, who is this Jose Martinez guy?
It's like he has nothing else to do.
Yeah.
But stalk your page.
Yeah, he says, I can also hear the frustration in the doctors' voices. They may think it's directed at legislature, but I think it's for the general health or poor health of the island. So you're kind of sticking up for the doctors, right?
I see their point.
I do too.
But it's their frustration, I think, is misdirected.
Yeah. Shouldn't be directed at Therese Terlahi.
No.
Okay. And then Jose goes on to say Bill 112 is about medical malpractice accountability. It's not about solving the general health of the island, which is something that, somebody needs to come forward and really address that. Going back to another Joe, our biggest health problem here is not doctors. It's not the hospital. It's what we're eating. It's our biggest problem, what and how much of it we're eating. Which reminds me, drive-through Jack, whatever happened to you? I want to talk about mutual consent if you ever call back in, drive-through Jack. I'm going to spend just a minute here with the Pacific Island Times. I've only got 5 more minutes, and the next item on my card is ruckus versus decorum, which goes to last night's hearing, but I don't want to start it and then break it off and have to come back to it again tomorrow. I want to lead off with it tomorrow. So once again, Pacific Island Times, pretty good sheet. It's a broad sheet. It's a monthly. I've been reading it for a long time. The publisher is Marvik Kagarangan. You talk about a journalist. Marvik's been around, I think, for at least 20 years. Was one of those Mariana's Variety coming to Guam via Saipan. She's worked for the Mariana's Variety, the Post, and now she's the publisher of this magazine called Pacific Island Times, which gives you more depth than you get from the daily papers or from the press releases that PNC News runs.
It's like a magazine.
Yeah, it's like a magazine. So a lot of really interesting stuff in there. And I hope you'll think that this one right here is. And it started Robert Bob Klitzkie, The Tall Tales of Being Insular. So guess what I'm talking about here in this article. And it starts out like this. Robert Klitzkie considers himself a recovering lawyer. Yeah, 12-step plan, and hey, take each day at a time.
We're proud of you, Bob.
Thank you. Yeah, I need a lot of support to continue my 12-step plan. Robert Klitzkie considers himself a Republican lawyer, as you were, a recovering lawyer, and a serial has-been. He has been a Marine, teacher, union officer, lawyer, director of education, director of corrections, senator, and judge pro tempore, to name a few.
Huh.
Yeah, a serial has-been, yeah. Couldn't hold a steady job. And then it goes on to say, in the latest phase of his self-reinvention, Klitzkie now hosts the thought-provoking talk show Tall Tales on 93.3 FM. Well, I hope the program is thought-provoking, right? The former senator, a Republican who served 2 terms, is never afraid of going against the tide. What tide? As a talk show host, Klitzkie is never coy about expressing conservative opinions that may run counter to popular views, as though liberal views are popular. Well, anyhow. So you might want to pick up a copy of of Pacific Island Times, and there's, if you read it, you probably shouldn't read it, you probably need to study it, right? Because there's something in there that you'll say, this is what they attribute to Bob, this theory here, this thought process. I don't think that's what he thinks. I've heard him say the opposite on the radio. So see if you could find that, and if you can, give us a call or post it on Facebook. And if you are the first one to discover what I'm talking about there, I will use my influence around here to get you a free 1-year subscription to Tall Tales.
That's a deal.
Yeah. Okay, Jose, where's that perfect timing? Thank you very much, Jose. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow with more Tall Tales. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Lawmakers flee Texas. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Several Democrats walking out of an emergency session of the Texas state legislature Monday, denying Republicans a quorum to consider a voting reform bill that would ban drive-through voting and require an ID for an absentee ballot.
Isn't that the most un-Texan thing you've ever heard? Texans running from a fight? They're quitters.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott on Fox's The Ingram Angle. Many of the Democrat Texas lawmakers have flown to Washington to call for new federal voting rights legislation. President Biden headed to Philadelphia today for a speech on voting rights.
Press Secretary Jen Psaki said President Biden declared after states started changing laws to limit voting options.
Access of people across the country to vote is going to be a fight of his presidency.
In Philadelphia today, the president plans to call out voter suppression as anti-American and recommit to his goal to empowering Americans
to make sure people know their rights and understand how to participate in the process.
Many Republicans, including former President Trump, still say the 2020 election was not legitimately won by President Biden.
Fox's Gernal Scott. In South Florida, 22 people remain unaccounted for in the collapse of a high-rise condo building. Now 94 victims have been recovered, and as the search nears its end, the community is debating what to do with the site.
We're having discussions now with the different levels of government, but most importantly, we're trying to understand